The crisis in Iran has reached a new and deadly turning point. Reports from human rights organizations suggest thousands of people have been killed. Communications remain restricted, and international pressure is mounting with sanctions and condemnations intensifying. What is the latest on this ongoing nationwide crackdown, and how close is Iran to a major escalation? Let's break it down. 1. Continuing violence and rising death toll. Iran's nationwide protests, which began in late December 2025 amid economic hardship and demands for political change, have now entered their second month of brutal suppression. Local activist networks such as the human rights activist news agency, HARNA, report over 6,000 documented deaths during the protest crackdown, including men, women, and children, with many more still under verification as communication remains severely restricted. The protest movement has touched nearly every region of the country, and despite the intensity of the crackdown, waves of demonstrations poured into the streets early on before security forces overwhelmed many areas. As connectivity was cut off, much of what is known comes from encrypted messaging and satellite internet posts shared by Iranians inside the country. The government's official death toll is significantly lower, but rights groups say deliberately limited information and ongoing internet disruptions make independent verification difficult. The near-total blackout of internet and phone networks imposed in early January continues to hamper independent reporting and verification of casualties and detentions. Medical sources and activists have also accused Iranian authorities of detaining injured protesters directly from hospitals, undermining norms of medical neutrality and raising serious concerns about the treatment of wounded civilians. A United Nations expert described this pattern as a blatant violation of humanitarian principles and deterrent to those seeking urgent care. 2. Intensified repression and human rights violations. Beyond killings and detentions, human rights watchdogs such as Amnesty International have documented a broad campaign of repression. This includes mass arbitrary arrests, enforced disappearances, torture allegations, and pressure on families of victims. Reports suggest that authorities are intensifying their use of military and intelligence forces, including plainclothes security units, to surveil, detain, and suppress dissent at every level of society. Children, students, lawyers, human rights defenders, journalists, and even members of ethnic and religious minorities have been swept up in these measures. Many detainees are reportedly held in unofficial locations such as warehouses and military bases, increasing the risk of mistreatment. The Iranian judiciary has also played a role in rapid and opaque prosecutions, with some protesters charged under severe laws that carry the death penalty, including waging war against God. In at least one well-publicized case, a young protester was condemned to death after a rushed process that rights groups widely criticize for lacking due process. 3. International reaction and escalating pressure. Globally, governments and multilateral bodies are responding with growing alarm. The European Union has officially designated Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps as a terrorist organization, citing its role in violent repression of protest movements and serious human rights violations. This designation includes sanctions on dozens of officials and entities linked to the crackdown. The EU also sanctioned Iran's interior minister, prosecutor general, and a key judiciary official for their direct involvement in violent suppression, signaling a deepening divide between Tehran and many Western capitals. At the United Nations, numerous condemnations and emergency discussions have taken place. UN human rights experts have highlighted systemic abuses, including the detention of injured protesters and families being coerced into silence, all under an internet blackout that isolates Iranians and obscures the full scale of the crisis. Meanwhile, Tehran sees these international actions as interference in its internal affairs and characterizes the unrest as the work of foreign agitators. This narrative is frequently repeated in state media and official statements, even as sanctions multiply. 4. Geopolitical tensions and the risk of wider conflict. The situation in Iran is not contained within its borders. Regional and global powers are watching closely. The presence of U.S. military assets, including an aircraft carrier strike group deployed to the Middle East, has become part of the broader strategic context, even as officials suggest the deployment is meant to ensure stability rather than initiate conflict. Tensions between Tehran and Washington remain high, and Iranian officials have repeatedly stated that any external military action would be met with fierce retaliation. These warnings heighten fears that domestic unrest could intersect with broader regional tensions, with serious implications for global security and energy markets. 5. Iran's domestic landscape and future outlook. Inside Iran, the effects of sustained repression are multifaceted. Economically, the prolonged internet shutdown and instability have strained everyday life and commerce, contributing to rising costs and public frustration. Socially, the crackdown has created deep trauma as families struggle with loss and fear. Despite the brutal repression, pockets of resistance and quiet dissent continue. Some residents are using limited communication channels to share stories and details of local arrests and detentions, preserving the memory of what has occurred despite efforts to silence them. As the crisis evolves, Iranian society faces profound questions about governance, legitimacy, and the future of political expression. Analysts warn that without meaningful reforms or accountability for human rights violations, tensions could re-emerge with greater force in the future. In summary, Iran's latest breaking news shows a crisis far from contained. Thousands killed, civilians detained and mistreated, global sanctions tightening, and deep geopolitical nerves fraying. International institutions are calling for accountability, while Tehran pushes back and doubles down on repression. This remains one of the most consequential human rights and political crises of our time, and its impact extends well beyond Iran's borders. Stay informed because this story is still unfolding, and in the years to come, its impact could resonate across the region and the world.